Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend, and usually I do horror-related things on the internet. This is kinda that and kinda not. This is a book review of a dark fantasy thing, so maybe it'll end up being Flights of Fancy, and maybe it'll just end up being a book review. But, hi, I haven't done this in a while. I uploaded my review of Arkham Anonymous pretty recently, as of filming this. I don't know when this will get uploaded because I filmed my Arkham Anonymous review back in February, and it didn't get uploaded until late May. So, yeah. Life has definitely kept me really busy. I've been up to a lot of stuff in regards to school and just personal life, so it has been very hard to get back to video stuff. And I can't promise that I'll have any kind of consistent upload schedule. I won't have a consistent upload schedule because I'm going to be taking this one video at a time and just putting things out when I can, because at this point I'm starting my summer job again, and this is, as much as I love doing it, it is a hobby for me. I don't make any kind of money off of this. It's just a wonderful chance for me to share the kinds of things that I love, support creators that I love, and connect with cool people. Expect more than one video from me this summer, probably, but not that many. This is also my chance to say Happy Pride as of my filming this, because it is now June. If you are not aware, or if you need a refresher, hi, I go by Anthropomantic Fiend, but I'm also known as Martin, M, or Emily. I am aromantic, asexual, gender fluid, she, they, he pronouns. And if you have a problem with any of that, or if you have a problem with queer people, or especially trans people, you can go fuck yourself. Anyway, this is my review of the book Fallen the Beginning. This is the debut novel from an amazing queer creator who you should be supporting, and a wonderful friend of mine, Galileo Henneman. It is a dark fantasy novel following a young boy named Oliver who is pulled against his will after he receives this strange pendant into a fantasy world that he is destined to save. He and his best friend Luke are both pulled into that world and are appointed as guardians set to save the people there, and are torn between the duty that they are starting to feel towards this other world and their desire to get home. The plot of this book is pretty familiar conceptually. There's a lot of stories of characters getting thrown headlong into this other world and being like told that they're the chosen one, and then being like, but I don't want to be the chosen one, and then being like, but maybe I should be the chosen one because these people need my help. And this is very much one of those stories, but it does it a little bit differently. And that's a storyline that, if it is done well, I appreciate greatly, and I think it was done pretty well here. It does also help that there's a lot of interesting world building going on. The fantasy universe here has a lot of different kingdoms, each of whom has their own different peoples. There are familiar ideas of magic and magical beings, but also just completely new races of creatures. I can't remember names off the top of my head, but there is a race of creatures who are changing their bodies over time, and their entire identity and even sense of gender and just everything about them changes with that. There's a race of bird people, and those two might actually be the same. I literally can't remember. It's been like a whole month since I started this book, but there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in terms of completely new races of beings and an entirely new sort of magic system that Galileo has created in this book that I thought was really interesting. And I'm just going to leave it to you to see how that magic system actually works, because one, I think it's really cool and is worth experiencing for the first time, and two, I do not have the energy to explain it in detail right now. The other thing that I think this book does really well is absolutely rip your heart out. I'm not going to say exactly what it does, but towards the end, I started to get really frustrated, and I mean that in the best possible way, because there were characters that I had fallen in love with that were just getting absolutely destroyed horribly. I'm not going to go into detail into what that even means, but towards the end of this book, some things happened that made me very unhappy. And then I was like, oh, I hate this. And then I was like, wait, no, I love this. This is achieving exactly what it's supposed to do. It's putting me in this character's shoes, and this frustration is investing me in the story in the best way possible. So I loved that. I hated it, but I loved it. Why would you do that? But also, great job. But fuck you. But good job. The one thing I will say in terms of plot is we get thrown headlong into the magical universe from where we are in terms of just establishing Oliver and Luke's life in the normal world and just their home life and all of that. We get that in kind of a little microcosm at the beginning of the first chapter, and then they're very quickly thrown headlong into the fantasy world, and we make a lot of connections with all of those characters, and all that happens really, really fast. And the book does make up for it by having a lot of flashbacks and Oliver remembering what life was like for him before this, kind of sprinkled throughout the rest of the book. But I do kind of wish we'd just spent a little bit more time with Oliver and the other characters in the normal world, establishing just a sense of what that was like in getting our bearings in that world, so we can completely get thrown off of our bearings as we are thrown headlong in the fantasy world. That being said, I'm realizing that the fantasy novel I am currently attempting to write does the exact same thing, because writing the fantasy kind of magical world is a million times more interesting than writing about the normal world or the normal part of the world. And your mileage may also vary just based on what your personal preference is, but that's a very small nitpick. Characters-wise, we have Oliver himself, the main character. Conceptually, he's pretty simple. He's just like a guy, pretty much. But emotionally, and in terms of his relationships to the other characters, I think there's a lot of complex and messy things going on in terms of the way he feels about other people back home, maybe traumatic events of childhood, all of the things that are getting thrown at him in the fantasy world, and his conflicted feelings towards other characters kind of are all articulated and kind of come to a head in a way that feels very messy for the character, but very carefully calculated by the writer. And I like the way all of that fell out really well. I also really like the way Luke is written. He seems very irritable and kind of blunt in a lot of ways, but incredibly likable. He's the kind of character who you can get on the bad side of pretty quickly, but will also kind of insult Oliver in a friendly way, it feels like. And he also sort of is very quickly established to be kind of a maybe love interest for Oliver, which was cool. In a similar vein, we have a character who hails from the fantasy world of this book, whose name is Reman. And he is kind of a noble figure, and he's kind of very externally, immediately very likable and charming, and he really likes books, which is nice. But there's something about him that just feels off to me, and I can't tell you what that is, and maybe it's just that there are things about him and his dynamic that make Oliver uncomfortable. But the fact that there's just something that feels a little bit off about him, even though he feels like, on the whole a good character, I think works for the story, once again. You've also got Bastian, who is one of the younger characters in the story, also hails from the fantasy world and is kind of just like a kid who's in training and has heard about these chosen ones for years and is just absolutely in awe of Oliver and Luke and is just the purest, sweetest cinnamon roll of a character ever. I love Bastian. And there are a few other important characters. There's Zosha, there's Calypso, there's a lot of characters that are worth unpacking. But the other main one I wanted to mention was Diane, who's kind of presented as being compared to kind of hippie-ish, has a kind of lavender thing going on, very just flowy in terms of the way she's described, and the main reason I'm focusing on her here is because she gave me major gender envy, which I think is a testament to how well described her character is and how much I can unhealthily imprint myself on a character. Which kind of segues nicely into how I feel about the queer representation in this book. Firstly, we quickly establish within the first chapter the pronouns of all the characters through dialogue, and that is the sort of thing that I'm never really sure how you're supposed to handle within a story because it can feel very clunky, and I don't think it flows perfectly here, but also I think that might be a case of quickly establishing pronouns of people hasn't really been, established as a convention in conversation in the real world yet, let alone in writing, and that might be why it doesn't feel as natural to me. It should be, and maybe I just need to reframe my thinking on the book because of that, because maybe it doesn't flow because I'm just not used to that being a normal thing that people do, even though it kind of should be a normal thing that people do. Another thing that's happening a lot in this is a lot of just something I don't experience because I am very, very aromantic asexual, but there's a lot of bisexual flusteredness happening, especially within the main character. And at first you're just like, oh, this character's probably gay, and there might be a love triangle thing happening because he's like, Luke and I have this thing going on, but Riemann and I also have this thing going on, and I don't know how I feel about that. And you're like, okay, love triangle, maybe. But then also there's a thing going on maybe with Calypso, and just all kinds of feelings happening. So I appreciated just how much confusion and desire and flusteredness is happening in this book. And then I also greatly appreciate the sheer amount of gender fuckery that is happening with some of the other races of characters. I love it when a book can do that. I love it in a book like The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is science fiction, but does that really well with a lot of its alien characters. It is allowed to really explore ideas of gender and social norms that are completely removed from anything in this world because of that, and I think something similar is happening with certain parts of this book, and I liked that. So all in all, I do have those tiny nitpicks about this book. I overall really, really enjoyed it. It is kind of just the setup for a larger story, I will say. So if you want something that is going to satisfactorily conclude itself, you're not going to get that, at least not yet. But I would recommend checking out Fallen the Beginning. And as of now, there is only one place you can check it out, and that is on Amazon Kindle. So I will put a link for that in the description. And if I can find other links that make sense where you can support Leo's work, I will try to put those in the description as well. That is my review of Fallen the Beginning. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!